Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. Before we get started, I do like to go over a few new discoveries I just found out about over the past week, and I do have a few exciting ones for you. And the first one is that we do finally have a date for the RuneScape board game. And this is coming from Steamforged Games that also created a lot of other games as well. Some that you might be more familiar with are Resident Evil, Bard's Song, and Monster Hunter World. And this one is also going to be a cooperative game, and players are going to be leveling up their characters, going on quests, and exploring an overarching campaign. So if you are a fan of RuneScape, you'll definitely want to be paying attention to this one, and I will go into this in a lot more detail at the end of the month when this one launches, so look forward to deeper coverage in the future. And the next announcement is that there is a new game that's going to be based on another video game, and this one is called Among Cultists. And if this one does seem a little sus to you, well, this one is actually inspired by the Among Us video game that I know a lot of people are a huge fan of. I've never actually played this one myself. I probably should, just so I understand all the memes. But if you're interested in this sort of gameplay applied to a board game, I expect this one to launch sometime in the summer. And then finally, Kickstarter Boardgames just announced that they're going to be launching a new game near the end of the year, and this one's called Maple Valley. It's going to be focused on hand management and set collection, but this is the sister publisher from Burnt Island Games, and both Burnt Island and Kickstarter Boardgames make a ton of excellent games. And I've been creating content long enough to know that a lot of you really do like anthropomorphic themes, and this is going to be offering that, so that's why I'm pointing it out. I don't really understand it. I mean, I guess they're cute. Is that what it is? And don't forget to check out Board Game Co's channel, because I do these videos every week, but he does one at the end of every month, and he goes over the following month, going into detail about all the games that we know of right now. You'll definitely still want to come back here for the weekly videos, because the games are constantly changing, and there's always new ones announced, and I do go into a lot more detail when I have a smaller subset of games to focus on. But he'll give you a great overview of the month and what you can expect, and what you might want to prep your wallet for in advance. He also has a ton of other really helpful content with videos dedicated to individual games as well, so as the campaigns are running, he'll give you updates and details as well as reviews and comparisons to other games, so you can start to understand which campaigns might be right for you and which ones you might want to avoid. Definitely go check him out, and I'll leave a link to his channel right up here. And with all that out of the way, let's check out what's launching this week. And the first campaign we have launches on March 2nd, and this one's called Raw, and it plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a really excellent auction bidding game from Reiner Knizia, who is one of my favorite designers. And this game was actually already released in the past, and this newer version is not going to be changing too much about the game, but it will be adding some newer artwork and some nicer components, and it will feature artwork from Ian O'Toole, who did a lot of great work in the industry. So you're pretty much just getting a lot prettier version of this game, but I'm sure there will be some small rules tweaks and improvements, as well as potentially some modules and more variety added to the game. But this is definitely the game that I'm most excited about. It's from a designer that I love, and it's a game that I love, and it is a game that's already released, so you can have a lot of confidence in it because you know exactly what you're getting, and it's been tried, tested, and true. But if you're not familiar with how this game plays, you're essentially trying to collect different tiles in order to score victory points by collecting different sets, because all the tiles score in different ways, and you're going to be slotting those into the different areas on your personal player board in order to track the tiles that you've collected and hopefully score the most victory points at the end of 3 rounds. But I did mention that there is a lot of variety in the tiles, and not all of them help you score victory points. Instead, some can give you some special actions or abilities, while others can actually cause disasters and cause you to lose tiles. But on a player's turn, they can take one of 3 actions. They can either draw a tile from the bag and then put it in the shared display here, or instead they can use a god tile if they have one in their possession to just take a tile from the display if there's a tile out there that they really want. Or you can trigger an auction, which allows all the players to either bid or pass on everything that you can see on the shared display, including this token in the middle, which I will get to in a second. Whenever there's an auction in this game, players will each be able to put in their bids starting from the player to the left of the player who initiated the auction, and then you're going to be essentially choosing one of the available tiles from the center of your board of different values, and each player will be able to put one of those out as their bid, and the player who put out the highest value after all players have either passed or bid will get everything in the shared display. This can happen at any time, so the board may not be as full as you see it now, which means that a lot of players might pass if there's nothing there that they really want. But for the player that did win the auction, they're going to be swapping the bid token that they used to win the auction with the one that is out on display. So they're going to be taking that one that's out on display and putting it on their own personal board face down, indicating that they've used one of their tokens, and their token is now out on display, and whoever wins the next auction will get the one that they put out there. So the different bid tokens will be getting passed from player to player, so you'll always want to keep in mind that whatever you are bidding, you are potentially giving an opportunity for another player to have that in a following round, because when it comes back to your board, it goes face down and it doesn't get flipped back up until all players' tokens are face down, and then that triggers the start of the next round and all of those get flipped back up. Since there's so much variety in the tiles, victory points can be triggered at different points in the game depending on the tiles that you've collected, but at the end of the third round, players are going to be comparing their overall victory points that they've gained to that moment, and then the player with the most victory points is going to win the game. If all that sounds fun to you, definitely go ahead and follow the campaign, and that'll also get you an enamel pin added to your pledge completely for free. And the next campaign we have also launching on May 2nd is called Pirates, Dragons, Treasure. And this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 15 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a competitive card game where players are pirates and you are upgrading your ship and building up your crew in order to fight a dragon, because in this game you don't fight each other, you're fighting a giant beast. And the way that this game works is at the start of the game you're going to be shuffling together all the dragon cards and then randomly drawing one to see which dragon players are going to be up against for this particular game. Most of the game revolves around the plunder deck, where players can find things like treasure, as well as ship upgrades, which essentially act as your health, or crew upgrades, which essentially act as your attack power. But just getting those cards into your hand isn't quite enough, because you have to pay the cost for the crew or that ship upgrade, which is where the treasure comes into play. To start the game, all players get dealt 5 plunder cards, and then they're going to be taking turns performing their actions. And on a player's turn, the first thing you do is draw 2 more plunder cards, and then you'll have an opportunity to negotiate with the other players to try and trade cards in your hand for other cards that you might need, because at the end of your turn, you're also allowed to put 1 card into play, which means basically putting it into your own personal tableau, and you are racing against the players to try and defeat the dragon first, so you're going to want to put the best card possible out, which means you'll really want to do well in your negotiations. The game continues like this, with players putting more and more cards out into their tableau until one of the players feels like they're ready to fight the dragon. And fighting the dragon is an action you can do on your turn instead of playing a card into your tableau. And once the battle's triggered, that player is going to go head to head against the dragon, drawing from the battle deck until either the dragon dies or they die. And the way that that deck works is that you'll be drawing cards one at a time, and they can have a positive or negative effect on you or the dragon, but each card has a few different effects it can have, and it all depends on the crew that you have available to yourself and the morale that you were able to obtain. If the dragon's health gets down to 0, then that player wins the game, but if their health gets down to 0 first, then they're going to be doing a full reset, wiping out their entire tableau and starting from the beginning, and the game continues. So you really want to make sure that you're in a good position before attacking the dragon, or else the other players will have a big head start on you. And of course, if this campaign interests you, I have links to this campaign and all the other campaigns in the description below. Also launching on May 2nd, we have Euthia Torment of Resurrection, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 480 minutes to play. And this is a giant sandbox fantasy board game that's inspired by RPG video games. And this new campaign is a reprint of all the existing content. You'll be able to get everything previously released in this campaign, but it's also going to feature a few new additions like the Fierce Powers expansion, which I will get back to in a moment. And if you're unfamiliar with this game, this is a competitive game where players will be exploring a map, uncovering different tiles and quests, and engaging in different battles in order to gain the most reputation and win the game. At the start of the game, players will choose their characters, each with their own unique playstyle and skill tree for players to explore and unlock as the game goes forward. And depending on the scenario that players chose to play, the game will unfold in different ways, potentially engaging in multiple battles with that final dragon throughout the entirety of the game. Each round, the players are going to be taking turns performing actions, and in order to perform your actions, you're going to have a few action tokens on your own personal player board, and you're going to be using those to move around on the board or perform different location-based actions like mining for resources on the tile that you're currently located on, or trading if you're in a town, or engaging in combat if there's enemies, or completing any quests that you have the opportunity to discover. Each player's board will also have different areas to track things like health, your weapon upgrades, any potions, or abilities that you have unlocked throughout the game. Players are going to be using dice rolling in order to engage in combat in this game, and each monster is going to have a card associated with it, and depending on the amount of damage that you inflict on that monster, it's going to trigger a response, and then potentially inflict damage back on the player. This is where your weapons and armor and potions come in really handy, because this will allow you to manipulate your dice rolls, and also defend on potentially incoming attacks. The game continues like this until the scenario is completed, and then the player that has the most victory points at the end of the game is going to win the game, and there is a ton of different ways to gain victory points, but of course the most exciting way is by inflicting a ton of damage on that dragon. And of course the game comes with some beautiful miniatures for all the monsters and characters, and all the different scenarios will offer a ton of variety both in gameplay as well as difficulty. The new expansion is going to be adding 4 new scenarios, a brand new hero that uses animal companions who she can control using her powers. There's going to be new cards, new weapons, new monsters, and an additional type of elementals. There's going to be new map tiles and new abilities for each of the 6 heroes as well. And as always, if you are interested in this one, definitely follow along with it because it'll get you the Griffin Mini expansion absolutely for free. And if you did back the original game, you also get a €10 discount on this campaign for being a returning backer. And I almost forgot to mention that this one is also our Discord pick of the week, so give in to that peer pressure and check this one out. And launching on May 3rd, we have The Flood, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this game takes place in a world that is slowly flooding, and players are trying to work as quickly as possible to generate resources, get those resources back to their ark, and then build up their ark, and then fill that ark with 2 of every animal. And the player who's able to do that first wins the game, or if no player is able to do that, then the whole world goes into extinction and we all lose. And at the start of the game, each player is going to get their own ark board and a mammoth board, and then players are going to be piecing together the different tiles of the main map, putting together a board which is going to be a little bit different from game to game with different terrain ending up in different locations depending on how it got put together. Each of the locations on the main board is going to have 4 resource tiles, where one of them is going to be an event tile that could potentially cause more flooding. These are going to be separated so that there's 1 event token at each location on the board, but these are going to be put face down so that no player knows which token is the event token. Players will then each take turns deciding where they want to put their ark build site out on the board, and then the game's going to begin. And the game plays over a series of rounds where players can decide if they want to take a resource action or if they want to take a build action. Players are going to be using huts and camps in order to generate resources, but then they're going to be putting out cargo trails and building caravans and using mammoths in order to bring those resources back to their ark. And if players want to use the build action, this is going to allow them to spend the resources that they have to expand their fleet of mammoths, build new huts and camps, or expand their cargo trails in order to cover more of the board. This will all help them build a little bit of an engine so that they're generating more and more resources so that they can build more and eventually start building their ark and loading it with animals, because you can always choose to build your ark instead of any of the other options. But the ark doesn't actually give you any benefit, it just helps you get closer to winning the game. So it's not something you'll want to do too early because you'll want to start generating your engine. But if the player chooses to instead take the resource action on their turn, then they're going to be rolling some dice, and any of their camps or huts that are on locations that match the icons of the dice are going to generate those resources. But then there's also a chance of rolling a story icon, which can also increase the flood. When taking the resource action, you can also move 1 mammoth, which will allow you to move some resources around on the board. But regardless of which action you choose to take, you can always barter with the other players or with the main player board as well, and trade some of your resources in for other resources or items. And the first player who is able to build their ark before the entire world floods wins the game. And launching on May 3rd, we have Creators of the First Dawn, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 50 to 150 minutes to play, and this is a competitive game where the last team or the last player standing wins. And in this game, all the players are gods who have agreed to put their power together in order to create a new plane of existence. The only issue here is that this new plane of existence has ripe opportunity for life and worshippers, and each of the gods want to claim it all for themselves. Luckily for all of you, gods are equally great at destruction as they are at creation. All the gods will be playing completely identically in this game, so it's a completely even playing field, but players will each have their own player board where they're going to be tracking things like their mana and their clay, and players will be using mana in order to create and destroy land tiles, as well as creating and destroying worshippers through things like meteors and volcanoes, but players can also use that mana to defend themselves against other players' attempts to destroy their land and their worshippers. The clay can also be used to build land tiles, but it's also used to build cities. Each player only has 3 cities throughout the entirety of the games, and that's the only way that you can generate your worshippers, so as soon as you lose all of your cities, you're going to lose all your worshippers and likely be out of the game. As players put land tiles out on the board, you'll actually be able to stack land tiles on top of other tiles, and you can even put city tiles on top of those land tiles, and as land is destroyed, the land below the city is always destroyed before the city, so the higher up your city is, the more protected it is. Each round there's going to be 5 phases. First there's the resource phase where players gain mana and clay based on the cities and worshippers that they have out on the board. Then there is the build phase where players will be able to spend that clay and mana in order to create those land and city tiles. Then there's the unit phase where players will generate worshippers from their cities. Then there's the movement and fight phase, and this one's interesting because players can move their worshippers to attack adjacent opponents. This has a really interesting way of how players' units get removed from the board, because players' strength is going to be determined by their total units on that tile, as well as any additional height that they have above their opponent, and then an extra strength if they are also on their city. Whichever player has a lower total strength based on that is going to lose all of their units on that tile, but then the winning player will most likely also lose units as well, because they only get to keep as many units as the difference between theirs and their opponent's strength. And then the final phase is the fortify phase, where players can use mana and clay to build even more land. The game continues like this until there's only one player standing, and then that player wins the game. And launching on May 3rd, we have SMAKdraw, and this plays 3 to 10 players and takes about 15 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a pretty straightforward party game where you're going to have one guesser, and the rest of the players are clue givers. And the way that this works is that you're going to be sticking a card on the guesser's back, and that card's going to have a word or a phrase on it. And while that player has their back turned, the other players are all going to be drawing something that can be helpful for that player to try and guess the word on their back. Once all the players are ready, the guesser is going to come back and look at all the drawings, and then they're going to select one as the most helpful and one as the least helpful. If the player is able to guess what the word was correctly, then they get a point, as well as the player with the most helpful drawing. But if they guess incorrectly, then the player who drew the least helpful drawing gets a chance to rationalize their drawing and try to explain to the other players why that drawing is helpful, and if they're able to convince the other players, then they're going to get a point. All the other players who didn't draw the least or most helpful images are all going to have to perform a challenge that's randomly drawn, and this could be something like a staring contest, a thumb war, or rock, paper, scissors, and those players are going to quickly compete against each other in whatever challenge it is, and the player that wins will get a victory point. The player with the most victory points wins. Also on May 3rd, we have Dungeon Makers, and this is a game for 1 to 2 players. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play, and this is a game about building the best dungeon. Players are going to be combining all types of dungeon tiles. There's going to be corridors, chambers, chasms, water hazards, and all sorts of things. And these different tiles will have different placement rules, scoring opportunities, as well as movement and scoring restrictions to your different minions, because you're also going to be putting minions out on the board and moving them around, and you can actually put your minions into your own dungeon, as well as your opponent's. And the really interesting thing about the way that this game plays is that all your actions are done through using the action tile, and every time you use it, you're going to be rotating it or flipping it depending on the action that you chose. But that's also going to restrict which sorts of actions you have on your following turn. So players will be choosing their actions from that tile in order to do things like place or move a tile or place or move a minion, but then they're also going to be flipping that, trying to make the most of it and set themselves up for the following turn. Once players have completed their dungeons, they're going to be adding up their points based on the tiles they placed, as well as the tiles they've managed to link together, and the minions and their effects on the point scoring opportunities. The player with the most victory points from all those combinations wins the game. And launching on May 3rd, we have Avalonia, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play, and this is a competitive post-apocalyptic game of area control. And in this game, each player is going to be leading their faction, trying to expand their army, gain resources, and conquer different regions in order to score victory points. The game plays over 8 rounds, with each round having 4 phases, and the first phase is the planning phase, and this is the phase where you're going to be planning out your actions for the following turn, and all your actions are done through these action cards, which each have 2 actions on them, as well as an initiative value located at the top of the card. And during the planning phase, each player is going to be choosing 2 of these action cards from their hand and then putting them face down to play in the next phase. And the next phase is the action phase, and something that's really neat about the way that the actions work in this game is that all the actions are done through the actions on these cards, and you can use both of the actions on a single card, but even though that you planned 2 cards and that would add up to 4 total actions, you're only going to be able to use 3 of those actions. And the reason for that is because you're actually going to be stacking the cards on top of each other, so that one card is covering half of the other, and you're only going to be able to perform the actions that are visible. Both players would reveal their cards simultaneously, and then whoever has the best visible initiative would go first. The actions allow the players to move around the board, attack other characters, harvest resources from the region that they're in, as well as research to gain even stronger action cards in the future, or even spawn more minions out on the map. And even though this is a sort of Mad Max post-apocalyptic world, it also has a kind of tie-in to a freaky King Arthur. Because the next phase is the King Arthur phase, and during this phase, players do blind bidding with resources that they have on hand, and players will hide those in their hand and reveal them all at the same time, and whoever made the highest bid would have to spend those resources. Then they also gain a victory point for appeasing the King Arthur. Then they gain 1 of the minions from the board to use as their own. And then that's followed by the cleanup phase, where players will gain income and score victory points based on the spaces that they control, and some spaces are worth more than others depending on what is in those individual spaces. The game continues like this until the end of the game, and the player with the most victory points wins. And launching on May 4th, we have Keresis, Quest for the Elements, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play, and this is a campaign that I did cover in the past, but it got pushed off until now, so I will go ahead and roll that footage for you now. Keresis, the Quest for the Elements, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a game that uses a modular board, and players are going to use actions to explore the map, gather resources, and then use those resources to control different territories on the board. When you control a territory, you can do special things with it, like rotate it or unleash the special ability that it has. And players are going to be trying to decorate their shrines in these different territories in order to gain victory points. And the first player to put an amulet on each of the 4 shrines wins the game, or the player with the highest victory points at the end of 24 rounds. And launching on May 5th, we have Age of Steam Deluxe Edition, along with 3 new expansions that are going to be introducing 13 new maps into the game. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a highly rated train game where players are going to be building up routes and tracks in order to move resources to different cities, issue shares, and earn income in order to build more tracks, and try to have the most victory points at the end of the game. And this game plays over a series of rounds, with each round having 10 phases, where all of the players are going to be moving through each of those phases together. And the first thing players are going to do is choose a map to play on, and the different maps will have different terrain types and different city locations and restrictions for players to place their tiles and tracks. Then the different game boards do a great job of walking all the players through each of the phases. And the first phase is the issue shares phase, where players can decide if they want to issue out shares and sell those to the public in order to gain some income early on. This does have a cost later because you're going to have to pay for all the shares you issued at a later stage in the game. And then in the second phase, players will be bidding for a turn order, which is going to dictate the order that they can perform their actions in the following phases. And this is especially important in the third phase because this is the select actions phase, and players are going to be putting tokens out on the board. And there's a few different abilities that players are going to be choosing from. Some of them will happen immediately, while some of them might be triggered at a certain phase or point in the game. But each ability can only be taken by a single player, so the person who's first has the most options. But then the fourth phase is where all the excitement happens, because this is where players will be paying and placing track tiles out on the main board and building up that all those beautiful railways to connect the cities. The next phase is the move goods phase, where players will be moving goods around on the board using those tracks in order to move those goods. And you can only move goods to a city of a matching color to that good. And doing so will move you up on the income track. And if another player uses your railroad in order to do that, then you both move up on the income track. And this is important because the next phase is the gain income phase, and you're going to gain income based on where you are on the income track. But as soon as you have money, someone's always there to take it away because the next phase is the pay expenses phase. You're going to be paying for any of those shares that you issued out in the first phase, and you're also going to be paying for any of the goods that you moved across the track because it costs money to move goods. The next phase is the reduce income track, where you're going to move down the income track based on your location on the income track. And then there is the goods growth phase, where players are going to be putting resources back out on the board from the main display, and players will be taking turns putting those back out onto the different areas on the railway. And then the game continues like this, repeating those phases each round until the game ends, and then players are going to be earning victory points by counting up all the number of links that they're able to build, and then multiplying their income track by 3 and adding those together, and then multiplying their shares issued by 3 and then subtracting that from their total. And the player with the most victory points wins the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we have a few awesome giveaways to announce, and this week is particularly awesome. Like, if I could win any week out of this entire year, I think it would be this week because we got some pretty sweet games, and these are all games I'm interested in. And one of these games I am backing, and the other two I came really close, but I think I'm probably going to go retail with those because unfortunately I can't win giveaways. And the first giveaway we have is for an all-in pledge for Uprising Titans of the First Age. I told you these were good. And this is a fantastic and challenging cooperative game that mixes area control and 4X elements, where players will all have control of their own asymmetrical faction that they'll be upgrading periodically throughout the game, and you're going to be playing over a series of events that are going to affect all players and competing against 2 different rival factions that are controlled by the game. Players will be gaining different types of resources and then spending them to build different buildings out on the board, and then deploy their units at those different buildings, and each of the units do behave a little bit differently and have a different subset of dice that they'll roll, which will change the odds of you performing different hits or actions depending on the dice, which will hopefully help you avoid getting clobbered by the opposing factions. This is a game that I currently have in my collection. I have no plans of getting rid of it. Everything in this game looks amazing. I personally am not a fan of standees at all, and I didn't know how I'd feel about these acrylic standees, but I actually really like them. They look incredible and they feel great out on the board, and they make all the units pop and very distinguishable out on the board. And I really love how the stronger enemies work in this game because every enemy has a unique ability that makes them very different from all the other enemies, but all of them also have a threat level, and the higher their threat, the more dice they're going to roll against you and the harder they're going to be to defeat. But the threat also doubles as their health, so the more damage you do to them, the more their threat is lowered, which is going to make fighting them just a little bit easier. So it really matters the order in which you inflict damage, because you really want to do as much damage to them before they're able to attack you, because if you can lower their threat at all, it's really going to help you put up a strong defense. The new expansion is going to be adding a ton of new modules to make the game both easier and harder, and you can mix them all together if you want it to balance out to the general area of difficulty that the game already is, which is on the harder side. But there's brand new factions, brand new enemies, brand new dice types, as well as mercenaries that you can hire into your faction. Also a deluxe component pack if you want to upgrade all the little cardboard bits in the game. Honestly, this game is just really impressive. You could tell a lot of work went into this game and a lot of playtesting and blind playtesting because the rulebook is fantastic, the gameplay is fantastic, and everything is just super streamlined, and you can see that a lot of thought was put into it, whether you're looking at the index or the iconography out on the board, or even just the sequencing of the different phases of the game. And if you do get an opportunity to play this game, I highly recommend giving it a shot. And if you want to know even more into why I like this game so much, I did put out a video explaining all of that, and I'll leave a link to that right up here if you want to learn more. But first, let's get you entered into this giveaway for the Ultimate Pledge! And this is going to get you everything for the game. It gets you all the gameplay content, all the upgraded deluxe components, and all unlocks from this and the previous campaign. And to enter this giveaway, all you have to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Uprising and let us know what the hardest game is that you've ever played, whether it's a board game or a video game, or even in sports. I've played a lot of games in my day, especially a lot of video games when I was younger, and those old video games were relentless. One game that I never beat because it just always destroyed me was Battletoads. I don't even know if this game can be won. Also, I've played Uprising several times and still haven't won either, but I feel like next game's the one. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the Uprising team here for donating such an awesome giveaway to the channel. I'm super excited for whoever wins this, and I just want to thank them for making this possible. They've also just been really awesome to work with, so if you want to show them some love, definitely give them some traffic over to their campaign. And the next giveaway we have is another awesome one that I know you're all going to be excited about, and that's because it's Wayfarers of the South Tigris. And this is the next iteration on the North Seas and West Kingdom series, where they're going to be exploring a new area in the south. If you are a fan of the series, you'll definitely want to check this one out. And if you're not a fan of the series, or if you have no idea what I'm even talking about, I think you'll still want to check this one out because this game looks like a lot of fun. It looks like a really solid design, and it has some really fun tableau building where you're going to be building up your board in different directions depending on the type of cards you're putting onto your board. And each type of card is going to work a little bit differently, and there's going to be different restrictions on how those can be placed into your tableau. But there's going to be land and sea cards that you're going to be using to build up your engine. Then you're going to be using townsfolk cards in order to upgrade those cards, space cards to earn victory point potential, and then inspiration cards to upgrade those space cards and improve the point scoring potential that they offer. There's also a really neat mechanism where you have this sort of grid on your player board, and you're going to be earning tiles and placing it in those areas in the grid. And then each column in that grid is going to be associated with a value on a die, which is listed at the top of the grid, so that when you roll that die, it's going to give you access to the icons and upgrades that you have put into that column. And being able to do more with your dice rolls is going to allow you to trigger more of the actions and abilities from the different cards in your tableau, which really makes this into an interesting tableau and engine builder. And this giveaway is going to be for the Wayfarer pledge, and this is going to get you the core game and the Kickstarter promo pack. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Wayfarer and let us know if you have any trips planned in the near future, or if you could plan one, where would you want to go? For myself, I'm actually in the middle of planning my next big trip to Indianapolis because I want to go to Gen Con this year. I've never been, and it's one of the biggest board game conventions, and I'd really love to just get out into the community a little bit more, meet more people in the industry, and hopefully meet a few of you as well. And for whatever reason, running the YouTube channel feels like it justifies the cost. And the next giveaway we have is for another great game, and this is for Lawyer Up Season 2. And this is a 2-player game where players will be choosing a scenario, and then you're going to be playing either as the defendant or as the prosecution, and players will be trying to pull the jury over in their favor. Players will be calling witnesses to the stands, bringing up evidence, and chaining different cards together based on matching icons in order to use that witness to their advantage. The order that you chain your cards together also matters because they all have special abilities on them, but the one that is at the very end of the chain is an ability that you'll be able to activate, as well as the witness's special ability if you're able to influence them the best. The Season 2 campaign is introducing a few new scenarios that players can also add to the game. There's going to be a billionaire divorce case, a casino heist, and a film noir murder framing. And this giveaway is for the Associate Pledge, which will get you a copy of the base game. And this giveaway is going to be a little bit different than the other two because this one's going to be over on the Discord. It's still super easy to enter. All you have to do is check out the link to the Discord in the description below, and then go to the giveaways channel, which you can find on the left under the Shelf Discord group, and you'll see a post for the Lawyer Up Season 2 giveaway. And all you have to do is click the little emoji under the giveaway, and that will automatically get you entered into the draw. And feel free to also explore the Discord because this is where we track all the upcoming games that we know about. And we have a channel for every single board game that I know of that's coming up, and we have them grouped into different sections. So if you want to see what's coming next week or next month or next quarter, it's all there for free on the Discord. It's pretty sweet and available to anyone. Best of luck in the giveaways, but let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, and this was for a pledge for Explorers of the Woodlands, which is on Kickstarter now, and you can go ahead and check that out. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you want to help support the channel, it really helps make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, and it also helps with the coffee situation too. It also helps get you some bonus entries into these giveaways, which is never a bad thing, especially when we have more and more epic weeks like we do today. Let's go ahead and draw those comments for last week's giveaway and draw the winner. And the winner is Don Gilstrap, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, so congratulations, Don. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Explorers of the Woodlands. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week. I hope you all have an excellent weekend. Mine's going to be pretty fun. It's my nephew's 2nd birthday tomorrow, and then I'm also going to be seeing some friends that I haven't seen in a long while on Sunday. I've also been working on a couple side projects lately. One's just for fun, but then one's to improve the Discord and improve the way that you can view some of the content in upcoming campaigns. So I'll definitely be talking more about that in the coming weeks, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with those of you on Discord and anyone else who wants to check it out. But until then, as always, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.